Headlines of the news. How many Pakistani students have been invited to apply for a return to China? China's COVID policy to shake the global economy. Dynamic zero COVID, more harmful than Ukraine crisis. China's COVID policy is set to be the year's largest economic shock. Sources of the news: Dawn, Asia Times. The Chinese economy is 10 times as large as Russia's and many more times that of Ukraine. With its strict dynamic zero COVID policy amid the Omicron variant, there are concerns about the impact this will have on the global economy. Lockdowns and closed borders have an important, but unfortunately negative, bearing on the global economy. China's lockdowns will have a great economic impact. Images of Shanghai's lockdown are surely not as worrisome for Western observers as the war in Ukraine, but its negative consequences on the global economy could be even larger. There are two reasons for this. The first and most obvious is that the Chinese economy is 10 times as large as Russia's and many more times that of Ukraine. Second, while Omicron has proved to be milder than other COVID-19 variants, China is sticking to its dynamic zero COVID policy in marked contrast with the rest of the world. This policy basically implies drastic mobility restrictions, including outright lockdowns that have been imposed on several cities, Shanghai being the largest, and all in all accounting for 40% of China's gross domestic product. In addition, half of China's highways are not able to be transited and ports are operating inefficiently because of large mobility restrictions. Travel from and to China has decreased. The consequences on China's own economic growth are noticeable in March data, especially in the service sector, but increasingly also in manufacturing, as some companies have decided to close their doors temporarily. A sudden stop in China's manufacturing would be a major shock for the global economy, as China exports as much as 1/3 of the world's intermediate goods. This is over and above potential international transportation problems, which are already becoming apparent in renewed increases in shipping costs. Beyond the reduction in domestic mobility, we cannot forget that since the COVID pandemic started in late January 2020, China's borders have been closed to the world. Returning to China from abroad hasn't gotten easier, and recently Chinese embassies in several countries have even announced tougher rules. This situation has an important, but unfortunately negative, bearing on the global economy. An obviously immediate consequence is the plummeting number of physical exchanges between China and the rest of the world, including both tourists and business exchanges. The former has caused economic recessions in several tourist destinations that had been of interest for Chinese travelers, such as Thailand. The slowdown in business exchange is one of the main reasons China's outward foreign direct investment has stalled since the pandemic started. This is particularly relevant for emerging economies with large financing needs, since they rely on external capital to build their infrastructure and upgrade their industrial capacity. Interest in the rest of the world is waning. The second unintended consequence of China's closed borders is the increasing lack of mutual understanding of the recent developments between China and the rest of the world. The much larger number of COVID cases in most countries when compared with China developed a strong impression among Chinese citizens of security at home and risk elsewhere, resulting in a waning interest in the rest of the world. This obviously does not bode well for future scientific or business collaboration between China and the rest of the world, although it is very hard to measure its immediate impact on the global economy. A good example of how much border restrictions contribute to dystopian views of the outside world is the state of affairs of the global economy at this current juncture concerning the war in Ukraine and its devastating consequences. All in all, China's dynamic zero-COVID policy could ravage the Chinese economy if lockdowns continue. And this also matters for the rest of the world, with consequences on the global economy. Beyond the reduced demand for imports from China, an even more immediate effect is inflation given the world's dependence on China's production of intermediate goods. Finally, the lack of exchanges with the rest of the world for close to 2.5 years does not bode well for the future of globalization and engagement between China and the rest of the world, especially the West. Federal Minister for Education and Professional Training Rana Tanvir Hussain on Tuesday directed the Higher Education Commission and other stakeholders to resolve visa and travel-related issues being faced by Pakistani students in China due to the COVID-19 pandemic. The minister issued the direction at a meeting with a delegation of Pakistani students who returned from China in the middle of their studies after the COVID-19 outbreak 2 years ago and remain stuck in Pakistan since then. Representatives of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, HEC, Aviation Division and senior officers of the ministry were present. The representative of the Foreign Affairs Ministry informed the meeting that in the first phase China had given a list of 251 students to Pakistan, out of which 60% students were reached out. The minister directed the HEC to use all resources in reaching out to the students who have not yet been contacted and also to set up an effective coordination mechanism between stakeholders for the exchange of necessary details. Considering the financial constraints of the students, the minister directed the authorities of the Education Ministry for working out a mechanism whereby the government will assist the students by sharing related costs involved. He also directed Pakistan's education attaché to Beijing to play a central coordinating role and follow up with the Chinese authorities to resolve the issues of the students.